The dream for so many business owners is one day to build a company that we can sell it. Buyers are by and large pretty smart. In aggregate, buyers are smart. If you're able to push pricing as a premium over your competitors, that means your brand is compelling the marketplace to pay you a premium.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel, and I want to welcome you back to the podcast. You know, when you think about growing a company, the dream for so many business owners is one day to build a company that we can sell it for tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. And we've had multiple clients who've done that, right? Many of the thousands of clients we work with, that's been their chosen exit strategy. For others, the exit strategy is to continue to own the business passively over a longer period. That's also fine too. In this week's episode of the podcast, though, I want to talk about 3 simple, straightforward steps that you can take wherever you're at in the company, in your business, to help you today prepare to down the road sell your company for top dollar. I want to give you the in the trenches part. You know, we've had over the course of this podcast, I know there have been episodes where I've talked with various outside people, Rich Wood, our coaching director, about selling companies, and I've talked with Kevin Bassett, CPA, about how he's helped clients sell. I've talked with John McDonald about how he, as an investment banker, has helped companies sell for hundreds of millions or even low billions of dollars. This week, though, it's not about theory, it's not about strategy, it's about in the trenches. So I'm going to give you 3 steps that you can take here today to figure out how can you sell the company for more down the road. So here's the first step. Step number 1 says, I need you to determine what's your company worth? What's the value of it, right? Determine the value of your business. Now, I'm going to give you a couple different ways to go about it. But first of all, I want to just kind of step back for a second. When you're thinking about the value of your company, part of it's going to depend on what industry you're in. Part of it's going to depend on how mature your company is. Is it a level 2 business that's really owner reliant? Or is it truly an owner-independent level 3 company that has a solid leadership team in place and systems and controls? Part of it's also going to depend on what's the scale of the business. If you've got a company with $1 million of revenue and $200,000 or $300,000 of profit, it's worth this. If you have that same company, but you've grown to the point where it's 10, 15 million of revenue and profitability is 3-4 times higher, it's worth quite a bit more. Not just because of the multiple, just because of the profit being higher, but the multiple of the profit, it's going to be even more so. Remember, most businesses sell for a multiple of its profit. So if a company has $1 million of profit and it sells for a 7x multiple, it's worth $7 million. But that same company who now has $5 million of profit, it might not sell for a 7 times multiple. It might sell for a 10 times multiple because it's a larger business that appeals to a larger buyer. It has more value with that part. So the first step is for you to put a value on the company. Now, here's 3 ways that you can do that. First of all, you probably don't know how to value the business, but it's important for you to look at it. So the first is, I would actually just go online and actually look, let's say, for example, you have a plumbing business. And I would search, what does a typical plumbing business with $5 million in revenue and $680,000 in profit, what's the typical multiple that a plumbing business would sell for, right? Second way you can go about it is to go and talk with your industry association people, right? Whether, if I have a medical practice or if I have a consulting firm or if I have a construction company, most times I'm part of a professional group or an industry association. And in those industry associations or professional groups, they oftentimes do have experts who have good feelings or senses for what's the formula for how a company in your industry and at your scale and maturity would be sold, right? What does it look like? And the third and final one is talk with an actual business broker or sell-side advisor or true investment banker. Now, who would you need to see? If your company is under $1 million, you're going to talk with, probably if it's under $5 million in revenue, chances are you're going to talk to a business broker. Hey, I'm not quite ready to sell yet, but I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking about that. And I would love to talk with you about, if I were to work with you, what might it look like with this? How would you value this business? I can ask them. A sell-side advisor is really the kind of that middle ground between a true investment banker, which is probably going to work with a company when they start hitting really at about the $10 million of EBITDA or profit or greater, is when you tend to see more true investment bankers being really interested. Sometimes it might be at the $5 million of profit, but between the few $100,000 in profit to maybe $500,000 in profit, that's business broker territory. Somewhere between $1 million in profit and 5 to 10 million, but probably 5 million in profit, there's a grouping of what we'll call sell-side advisors, consultants, who are not quite investment bankers, but they do in fact help companies sell. And that's their bread and butter for what they do. I can have the same conversation. And then when you start getting over a certain amount, the investment bankers are where you go. Matter of fact, I was having a conversation on behalf of a business that I was representing, an investment banker getting his thoughts for how would he look at valuing what types of buyers might be there for our type of company. And he was going and doing the research for us. Why? Because the investment banker, the sell-side advisor, the business broker, they all make money by eventually when you sell, you doing it through them. They might make anywhere from, on the business broker side, it might be 10% of a commission on the sale of the company. And at the investment banker side, it probably is a much smaller percentage on a sliding scale based on how large your company is and how great the sale is. But the point being that they will want the relationship with you because they know that for them to earn the right to sell your company at some point, they're going to have to do a little bit of freebie work in their consulting and giving input. It's kind of what a real estate broker has done for years, whether it's a commercial broker giving opinions about, hey, here's some properties you might consider for your needs, or a realtor who's helping people sell homes and say, hey, let me just tell you, if we sold your home, I'm thinking you probably would get $1.5, $2 million for it. Right? That's not unusual. Same thing for business brokers / investment bankers, sell-side advisors. So step number one, we have to get a sense for what's my business currently worth. And what's most important is not just the dollar value, but what's the formula? What's the way in which a business in your industry is typically valued? And now I can ask follow-on questions with those people about, well, what are the elements that would make my business even more valuable? They might say, well, David, if you went from $500,000 in profit to $2 million in profit, your multiple is going to jump up. And David, right now you have a real reliance on you. If we could reduce that reliance on you and have a true leadership team, your multiple is going to jump up. And hey, David, right now you have 2 customers that are really represent most of your sales. They're 80% of your revenue, 84% of your profit. That's a real concentration risk. That hurts you in the valuation. So step number one, what's your business worth? Get a picture of that. And how is it valued? It's not just what's it worth, but you're asking the question, how is it valued? Buyers are, by and large, pretty smart. In aggregate, buyers are smart. Any one buyer might be smart or not smart, but in aggregate, the things that they look at that make them want to pay more or make them want to pay less, they're smart. They tend to be things that make the business better or worse depending on which side they are on. The second step you're going to take, again, it's a simple step. The second simple step is you're going to actually do what we call a buyer's audit. Now, a buyer's audit says, I'm going to look at my business through the lens of how would I view this if I were an actual potential buyer. I'm going to look at the concerns for what buyers have and look at my business that way. Concerns of what buyers have would include things like concentration risks. Anytime you have more than 10% of your profit or 10% of your even revenue is typically what they'll look at, coming from one customer, that's a risk, right? And the larger that percentage is, they're going to ding you on that on the sale. Why? Because it's risky for them. They've learned over time that's a risky thing. Second risk from a buyer's perspective is going to be about the management and the leadership of the company. How long have they been with you? How secure are they? Are you going to retain them? Do you have gaps or weaknesses? Are you the owner having to wear 4 different department heads' hats? All those are things that are going to depress or increase the value of your business. Third, how clean are your financials? The more you'd have to explain your financials to a buyer, the more concerns and red flags that brings up. Your financials should be clean enough that they speak for themselves. If you're timely reviewing your financials every month, balance sheet and P&L, your balance sheet's being tied down and people are doing a good job with that, that's a great thing. If it turns out that you'd say, well, David, you can review my financials, but I would have to explain it to you, that's a real red flag for a buyer. Again, that means you're doing things in strange ways. That makes me doubt the veracity, the truthfulness of your financials, which means I'm likely to go ahead and want to pay less or not buy it at all. Fourth, who are the competitors that are out there? What makes you stand out? How have you built a moat competitively about your business? Is it based off a reputation or brand in a certain market niche? Do you have a better product or service that just the market recognizes as the leader, quality, etc.? Do you have a way of producing at real cost advantages? Do you have a real following so that the marketing side and the sales part of your company is a machine? I want to look at that part. I'm going to look at how do you stand relative to competitors? And I'm going to give you a cheat sheet way. I'm going to give you a kind of a hidden question you can ask that really tells you, or sign that tells you how strong you are relative to your competitors. So there's two of them. One is when you go head to head against your competitor, how often do you get the business versus your competitor? For a qualified prospect who's now talking to you and to your main competitor or competitors, how likely are they to go with you versus these competitors? If they're much more likely to go with one of your competitors, that's saying something about your company. If head to head they almost always go with you, and you're being honest about, that's a real good sign. Here's the second way that tells you how you're fair against your competitors. How strong are you on pricing? If you're able to push pricing as a premium over your competitors, that means your brand is compelling the marketplace to pay you a premium. That's saying something about you versus your competitors in a good way. Apple products are a great example for it. An Apple product might be 20, 30% more expensive, and they can command that because of where they stand relative to their competitors. Their brand and their technology and their reputation lets them to do that. And then the last kind of place I'll look at in your buyer audit is your buyer's going to want to know about you versus the future. How likely is your business to get swallowed by some technology platform that's going to take over your business? The equivalent of being Amazoned to death, right? And this doesn't literally mean Amazon, but for example, let's say that you have a business wherein you produce blue-collar services in an industry. Well, is there an entrant that now is moving towards kind of an aggregated way? And I'll give a different example for it, one that I experienced. I recently took a trip with my wife to Croatia. We had a great trip. And on that trip, we had private cars drive us from city A to city B. We took a car from in Slovenia to Zagreb, the capital of Croatia. From Zagreb, we went down to Split, for example. Now, our travel agent found us that from a website platform, and it turns out the website platform might charge us $600, but they took essentially half of that and paid half of it to the driver. Whereas 5 or 10 years ago, our travel agent would have gone directly to the driver. This platform, it doesn't matter which it is, has taken over a large part of the market share, which means if you had a tour business where you did driving and this other platform was clearly eating your lunch, your company is worth a lot less because its future is really in danger. It doesn't have an independent source of clients. It's getting clients through this aggregator who's taking the lion's share, who started off taking 10% and now is taking 45% of every dollar that comes in and just paying the discounted amount. It was interesting. It was an interesting business model that they did. I don't know if it was good or bad with that, but doing your buyer's audit, you're going to look at your company through the eyes of a buyer. Honestly, what are the things that make your company more valuable? What are the things that give you pause or concern as a buyer that would depress the value? And then now, by doing that, it makes the third step much easier. This third step says, fix it, right? Do those things that enhance the value and fix those things that depress the value. And so I do more of one and get rid of the things that hold it back. And these are 3 straightforward, simple steps that will make a difference for you in building a company that's more valuable. Here's the cool part. It might take you 30 minutes to 2 hours to figure out the valuation and understand that about your industry and business. It might take you an hour to do your buyer's audit. It might take you then 1 to 3 hours per month over the next 12 months to start making improvements on fixing the things that your buyer's audit said, to enhance those things that create value and to fix those things that depress value. If I do these steps down the road and I move to sell my company, I will be so much further ahead. I'll typically go ahead and sell for a 1 to 2 times extra on my multiple. So if I would normally command a 5x, I'll now get a 6 to 7x. That's a big deal. Plus, these things that fix it are likely very much going to increase your profit. Why? Because buyers on aggregate are smart, and if these are things that make the company enhance value and fixes the things that depress value, almost always it will also mean it will increase your profitability. That these are smart ways to strategically be thinking about and tactically be thinking about increasing your profitability in the company. I hope you enjoyed this week. I hope it was a good, simple 3 steps, right? Get a valuation for your company. I'm not saying get a formal valuation from a CPA who does valuations. There actually is a designation for that. I'm saying that for you to learn how is a business in your industry at your scale, size, and your maturity, stage and development of the business, level 2 versus level 3 business, how is it valued and what would it mean for you today? Then I do my buyer's audit, second step, look at my business through the eyes of a buyer. And the third and final step is, based on that buyer's audit, I do simple things each month, 1 or 2 simple things to enhance value and to fix things that depress value. And I do that month after month after month after month. And at the end of 6 or 12 months, I take stock again. I do another buyer's audit. And I use that to guide me for the next 6 months, 12 months. And I do that down the road. If I end up selling in 12 months, 24 months, 60 months down the road, I'll make my company much more value because I've done that. All right, thanks for joining me this week on The Business Coach. I wish you every success in your company. Thank you again. Bye-bye.